In 2014, USS introduced a series of 3 tests which were supposed to ensure that the scheme was healthy in the long term. One of these is called Test 1, and that's what I'm going to try and explain today. In particular, I'm going to hopefully cover why Test 1 leads to a de-risking of assets in the scheme. Okay, so to understand Test 1, we need to understand how assets, liabilities and things like that work. So, first things first, let's look at the present day, year 0. So the scheme holds various assets and these are invested in things like gilts, equities, property, a whole load of things, but it's possible to get an estimate for their value by looking at market prices. Okay, so that gives us a figure for assets for year 0. Right, now here I've got some axes. This is our year 0 set of axes, and suppose we've valued our assets and we get a certain amount like so. Okay, so we know our assets, that's good. The thing we need to go with them is an estimate of our liabilities. Okay, so what are liabilities? Well, of course, they're the sum, if you like, of all the future benefit payments that are due on the scheme at the present time. So you need to estimate those liabilities by using various assumptions on pay growth, on longevity, on a whole load of things. One of the key things you need to think about is what's called the discount rate. Now that's, if you like, a proxy for how much return you'll get on your assets. The idea being that your assets will be invested and will grow, and so the liabilities, you don't have to pay out of this fixed figure here, but out of a figure that grows year on year. So that means that your liabilities, if you like, future liabilities are worth less each year that they occur. So you discount them using a so-called discount rate. Anyway, the key point is you can get a figure which is, if you like, a prudent estimate of your liabilities. Now, at the moment, according to USS, this looks something like this. So here are our liabilities, and in this picture the liabilities are bigger than the assets. Okay, and this difference here is called the deficit for this scheme. So the idea here is we don't think we've got enough money in the bank, if you like, our assets, to pay off all the liabilities for the scheme. Okay. Now, there's a name for this graph of liabilities here. This is called the technical provisions for the scheme. Technical provisions. Okay, so this is a prudent estimate of how much your liabilities will cost. Right, now let's leave that for a minute. Fast forward 30 years. Now, why am I fast forwarding 30 years? Well, 30 years is some kind of figure which could be used as the so-called covenant horizon. So this is, if you like, the time period on which it's clear that the universities will exist to be able to back the scheme. Okay, so let's go to year 30 and let's play the game again. So let's pretend we're 30 years into the future, assuming things have gone as we forecast. What does the picture look like there? Well, the assets have grown, okay, because we've got this figure here. The scheme is cash flow positive, I believe, meaning more is coming in each year than going out. So not only would these assets have grown because of this positive cash flow, but also because they've been invested and they've grown, roughly speaking, according to that discount rate we mentioned earlier. So our assets now look bigger than before, which is good. Okay, so I hope that's a bigger bar chart than the previous time. Now, also what's happened is our liabilities have grown. Why is this? Well, roughly speaking, there's inflation. That's one measure that will cause the liabilities to be bigger if we looked at the same picture in 30 years' time. There are other reasons that liabilities can grow. If the scheme's getting bigger, then of course, so more people involved, there'll be more to pay out. And so on. And wage growth, of course, is another factor that will cause the liabilities to grow. So, at year 30, the technical provisions, the prudent estimate of liabilities, are also bigger. And I realise I'm going to run out of room here, so soon I'll have to erase the year 30 title. Okay, so that's the picture in the future, except it's not quite the picture in the future, because given a situation like this, USS will kick in and say, well, we need a recovery period for the fund. In other words, we need to get rid of this deficit over the course of the covenant horizon. Okay, well, if they do that, that means that our assets haven't just grown to this bit here, there's also an amount due to contributions from the employer. Maybe I'll use a different colour. Okay, we now have an extra chunk on the top, not just contributions from the employer, but contributions, so we'll call them extra contributions for deficit recovery. Okay. So year 30, things are looking good. The idea is we had a deficit here. Somehow USS changes the contribution rate or the benefits for the scheme, and that means that in year 30 we're back to a balanced scheme. That's the approach that's generally taken. Now, so far we haven't talked about anything to do with test 1. This is just the basics.